Hi everyone! Today we'll be learning about graphing the cosine function with transformations. So we will work with two cosine functions, one with a negative amplitude and one with a positive amplitude. So the first one is 2 cosine of 2x minus pi over 6 minus 1, and then the second one is negative 3 cosine of 2x plus pi over 3 plus 1. So we have to remember that the general form of a cosine function is y equal to a cosine bx minus h plus k. Here we know that a is the amplitude of the function, whereas b can be derived from the formula of the period, which is 2 pi over b. And then h is the phase shift and k is the vertical shift. Now let's try the first one. So first, let's try to figure out the general graph of a cosine. So at 0, cosine is 1, right? At pi over 2, cosine is 0. At pi, cosine is negative 1. At 3 pi over 2, cosine is 0 again. So at 2 pi or 360 degrees, cosine is 1. So this is how it generally looks like. So that's one period. Now from the function y equal to 2 cosine of 2x minus pi over 6 minus 1, we can see that 2 is multiplied to the value of cosine. So that means that the amplitude literally amplifies the value of cosine. So we have to multiply it by 2. So 1 becomes 2, 0 becomes still 0, and negative 1 becomes negative 2. Then we have to consider the vertical shift, which is negative 1, so that means we will subtract 1 from this. So that will become 2 minus 1, 1, and then 0 minus 1 is negative 1, and then negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. So that means that this will be the new values of our function. So it will range from 1 to negative 3. So now what we have to find out is where our period will start and where it will end. So we know that it will start at 0, so that means that we have to equate the terms inside the cosine to 0. So that's 2x minus pi over 6 equal to 0, and that will give us a value for x, which is pi over 12. And then after identifying the start, we should also identify the end of the function. So the end is 2 pi, so that means that we have to equate the whole term to 2 pi. So that becomes 2x minus pi over 6 equal to 2 pi. Then we add pi over 6 to both sides, and that will give us a value for x, which is equal to 13 pi over 12. So that means one of our periods is from pi over 12 to 13 pi over 12, and from there it will just repeat to the left and to the right until we reach infinity and negative infinity. So the center of this function is 7 pi over 12. So at 7 pi over 12, the value is negative 3. And then between pi over 12 and 7 pi over 12, that is 4 pi over 12. And then 7 pi over 12 and 13 pi over 12, that's 10 pi over 12. So the value for those points is negative 1. So that means this will be our function. And now what you can do is graph it on our Cartesian plane. So let's write the x coordinates, which are the values of the angle. I mean the values of x. So after we write the coordinates for the x-axis, what we can do is plot the points. So our midline is at negative 1. Here, let's plot it. So at pi over 12, the value of y is 1. At 4 pi over 12, the value is negative 1. At 7 pi over 12, the value is negative 3. At 10 pi over 12, the value is negative 1 again. And at 13 pi over 12, the value is 1. Now, this will just repeat to the left and to the right. Now, let's connect the points, and this will be the graph for the transform cosine function. Now let's proceed with graphing the cosine function with transformations where the amplitude is negative. So first, let's graph the general form of a cosine, which is at 0, it's 1, at pi over 2, it's 0, at pi, it's negative 1, and then at 3 pi over 2, it's 0, and at 2 pi, it's 1. So as we have established earlier, the amplitude literally amplifies the value of the cosine function. So that means we have to multiply these values by the amplitude, which is negative 3. So for that, it will become, for 0, it will become 1 times negative 3, which is negative 3. For pi over 2, that is 0 times negative 3, which is still 0. And then for pi, it's negative 3 times negative 1, which is positive 3, and then 3 pi over 2 is 0, and 2 pi is negative 3. So we can see that if the amplitude is 0, the cosine graph flips. Now let's not forget that we still have a vertical shift that we have to work on. That means that we have to subtract this to the values on the right. So that becomes 2, negative 1, and negative 4, which means that negative 1 is our new midline. Now let's start identifying the start of one period. So we can do that by equating the terms inside the cosine function to 0. So that's 2x plus pi over 3 equal to 0. And that will give us a value which is negative pi over 6. And then the end of this period will be equal to 2 pi. So that means 2x plus pi over 3 is equal to 2 pi. Here we can get a value for x, which is 5 pi over 6. That means that the start of our function will be at the start of our period will be at negative pi over 6, and it will end at 5 pi over 6. So that's one period. The value at the middle will be 2 pi over 6, and the value there will be 2. Between 2 pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6, we have 7 pi over 12. And then between negative pi over 6 and 2 pi over 6, we have pi over 12. Now let's say that the points will just be the same. So this is how one period will look like. Now let's try to graph it. So if we graph the points, the highest point will be at 2 and the lowest one will be at -4. -1 is still our midline. So this is how our graph roughly looks like. Sorry for the rough drawing.